Tardes, colegas y invitados distinguidos. Bienvenidos a nuestro panel de discusión para emprendedores empresariales del mes de la gerencia hispanoamericana. Good afternoon, colleagues and distinguished guests. Welcome to our Hispanic American Heritage Month Leadership in a Multicultural Age panel discussion. National Hispanic Heritage Month traditionally honors the cultures and contributions of both Hispanic and Latino Americans. The profound words of Cesar Chavez, "Si se puede," yes we can, ring boldly true about Latino veterans and America's rise to greatness, our way of life, and our freedom to live, work, and raise our families. Throughout history, Latinos and Hispanics have come from places that have long valued a tradition of military service. We have tremendous pride in our record of military service and have used our status as veterans to advance the equal treatment and integration of Latinos and Hispanics within our society. Through their dedication, military service, these veterans have worked tirelessly to promote Latino and Hispanic equality, denoting that Latinos have fought in every US conflict from the American Revolution to the most recent conflict in Afghanistan. A quote from retired Army Master Sergeant Roy Benavides, Medal of Honor recipient from the Vietnam War, epitomizes the Latino call to duty. I believe there is no greater calling for a man or woman than to serve in the military of a free nation. I believe it is a calling that transcends all others because it is embedded deep in the soul of every free man and woman and was earned by our ancestors. Now, every generation must relearn these lessons, and only through the transfer of this basic knowledge do free men survive. Our Latino and Hispanic veterans are living examples of what it means to be good citizens and leaders. They have given us a lifetime of service, and our country has been enriched by their contributions both in and out of uniform and in business today. Which brings us to today's event. What does it take to lead people from a wide variety of races and ethnicities, from different lived experiences and backgrounds? And what are some of those challenges? I'm pleased to welcome you to Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families webinar on just that. I'm looking forward to hearing from a leading female Hispanic leader, as well as my own leader, the IVMF's Chief Operating Officer, Maureen Casey, who will moderate this powerful discussion. Please welcome Maureen and our distinguished panelists, Major General Angie Salinas, along with the IVMF's very own Director of Applied Research, Rosalinda Maury.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thank you for your service and contributions. I think your words about good citizens and leaders couldn't be more apt as we about to spend the next hour together talking to Rosie and General Salinas. As Joe said, my name is Maureen Casey, and I am privileged to serve as the Chief Operating Officer for the Institute for Veterans and Military Families here at Syracuse University. And we're really pleased that you all have decided to join us for what promises to be a very engaging hour-long discussion in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. We so appreciate the contributions and impact of Hispanic and Latino veterans and military families. As Joe mentioned, it dates back to the earliest days of the founding of the US. And while this month has been set aside to recognize and focus on Hispanic Heritage Month, we all need to be more cognizant about remembering those contributions of our Hispanic and Latino colleagues every day of the year and not just for this one month. And so with that, as Joe said, we're just really honored and pleased to have General Salinas with us and Rosie Maury with us. General Salinas, I think maybe to this this crew needs no introduction, but it's not often that someone like me gets to introduce someone like her. So I am going to take that opportunity. General Salinas is now the Girl Scout, head of the Girl Scouts in Southwest Texas as its chief operating officer, which she started in 2015. Prior to becoming its CEO, she served in the Marine Corps for 39 years. And she is a woman of many firsts. She made history as the first Latina selected and promoted to the general officer ranks in the US Marine Corps. And at the time of her retirement in September of 2013, she was the senior ranking woman and the senior Hispanic in the Marine Corps. She commanded at every level from lieutenant to general and is a trailblazer, serving as the first woman in multiple assignments. She's been recognized with multiple awards and is deeply engaged in her community. We as trainers of entrepreneurs here at the IVMF are excited to see that she is also among her many community engagements, a member of the National Association of Women Business Owners. She's a native of Alice, Texas, and we're just so thrilled to have her here. She will be joined in this conversation, as Joe said, by our very own Rosie Maury, who has a master's from the University of Texas in San Antonio. So she and the general are fellow Texans. She is our director of applied research. She works on a very diverse research portfolio on a range of challenges facing the military connected community. She is renowned for her expertise in survey development and worldwide data collection, and then the analysis of that data. And probably more significantly, is able to tell a story with that data in a way that allows us to be impactful in the programs and services that we're able to offer. She's been frequently published. She is an in-demand presenter across the country for all things military connected with the research that we do here from the IVMF, and we're really honored to have her as one of our colleagues. And so with that, we're going to get started, and we're going to start with a little more background on our two panelists. And first, General Salinas, I'm going to go to you. When we had the opportunity to speak a few weeks ago, we were fascinated by your pre-military days and your upbringing. So could you tell us a little bit more about your upbringing and how you came to be commissioned in the United States Marine Corps?
Well, first off, thank you for everything that you all do for veterans and really for promoting women. And I'm just really honored to be here today. And of course, Rosie, you're from San Antonio, and I just feel like we're already sisters. And I'm just so excited to have an opportunity to celebrate Hispanics. And I think, again, just the wonderful culture and the history that we have, and to just really welcome everyone who's participating today. This is I just kind of smile because I just feel like we're all flat Stanleys and flat Marys, and I can't wait for the day when we can still be, meet each other three-dimensional. So I would like everybody to kind of turn sideways, so you could actually see each other in a different view than just this flat look. But I am a native Texan, obviously grew up for early years in the Alice area. My family actually dates back to one of the first 5 families who received land from Spain way back in the early 1700s. But my parents are from the Oilton, Texas, the little ranchitos down by Laredo, Texas. Family of 5. My parents were not well educated, but they were wicked smart and blessed their children with the American dream of getting their high school diplomas. They gave us a great work ethic and really this desire to give back to the community, I think. And I was really blessed, I think, to kind of have this ingrained pride of my heritage and my culture. And I, when I was about 7 or 8, I think the family really recognized that discrimination for Hispanics was still very, very prevalent. And so when my dad moved us to California, which was at the time really pretty much a melting pot, and a lot of the Northern California outside of the Bay Area, we just kind of all grew up around everybody else, for that matter. So there were African Americans, there were many Hispanics. We just kind of all grew up in the same neighborhood. I went to a small Catholic high school, just all girls. All 5 of us reached the American dream. All of us kind of got our high school diplomas, and then everybody kind of went in different directions. Nobody really went off to college, believe it or not, because no one who, we didn't know anybody went to college. Essentially everybody went off and just kind of got a job or got married, and that's what my sisters did. And so when it was time, my friends were all going to college, and I think I had FOMO long before anybody else even knew what FOMO was. I mean, my friends were all going, so I said, okay, I'm going to go to college too. And so I applied to one college and I got in. So of course I went, not really knowing what to expect. And I looked around and realized that nobody else that looked like me was there. I mean, it just, there weren't really any brown people. And I did one thing really well for those first 2 years. I just learned to have a good time. I mean, I just really kind of partied. And at the end of the 2 years, because I didn't go equipped with all the resources, I really didn't have good study skills. I just really was not academically prepared. And so I really found myself just really convincing myself that this isn't where I belonged. And at the end of 2 years, I really was essentially ready to drop out. And so I went to go mail a letter. So this is really kind of the early stages of the 70s, and Vietnam War, the news just covered nothing but how terrible the Vietnam War was, all these protesters, everybody's burning the American flag. At the same time, we've got an astronaut landing on the moon with the American flag. So this is just a really different world in the sense that we've got all these messages. And I went to go mail a letter, and this Marine recruiter steps out, looks me in the eye and says, "Why aren't you a United States Marine?" I'm 19 years old, I look at this guy in these dress blues, and it's the 30th of April. And I said, "Look, buddy, I am just trying to mail a letter. Get away from me." But he must have, been very convincing, because by the 4th of May, I raised my hand and said, "I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States." By the 7th of May, I'd already gotten on a plane, flown to Parris Island, South Carolina, and I am being greeted by a couple of Marine drill instructors who can only welcome you into the Marine Corps the way drill instructors can. And I really had a really bad case, I think, of buyer's remorse. But I found during that transformation of that time in boot camp, that everything that I believe my parents were trying to instill in me, which is essentially education is the door, to nobody's going to give you anything in this life, which is that you have to earn it. And that's what the Marine Corps really demanded, is that you will earn the title of Marine. And the idea that selfless service was really what resonated with me, giving something, being part of something greater than yourself. And so upon graduation, I beat feet right back to school and jammed 4 years of education into 2, and was able to get my college degree. And once I did, marched right back into the Marine Corps. So that's essentially the story of how I became and earned the title of Marine. Very long story, shut into a short period of time.
Fascinating story, though. Who would have thought that the U.S. Postal Service mailing a letter would lead to such an incredible career? I'd love to hear a bit more. As you said, no one can welcome you to the U.S. Marine Corps, and you earn the title of Marine. But tell us a little bit about your journey in the Marine Corps, some of the challenges that you encountered, both as a woman and as a Hispanic. As we heard in your bio, throughout your career, you were the first in so many places and in so many ranks. What were some of those challenges, and how did you navigate them?
Well, now remember, I'm joining an organization whose advertisement was, "We're looking for a few good men." So already you're joining an organization that doesn't necessarily want you. This is an organization, again, at the end of the draft. It's the beginning of the all volunteer force. And so Miss Rosie's probably got some great data that would show an organization well about 174, 175,000 Marines, less than 2,000 of them are women. So if you do the analytics, the chances of surviving that number to achieve the position that I got, I mean, the chances, I could have probably won the lottery 4 or 5 times if you really calculate that. But the deal is that really it talks about performance and opportunity and taking advantage of that. And so I was able to, again, go in and just take advantage of doing whatever assignment I got, was doing it well. My first duty station actually after graduation is I came to San Antonio, and I was in the reserves because I'd finished college. And so now my opportunities were coming to San Antonio. And then it was the Marines here in San Antonio who said, you need to be an officer. And so they were the ones who encouraged me to apply for the enlisted commissioning program. They were the ones who put in the package, and then based on their recommendations, that's how I was able to get into the commissioning program. And then the Marine Corps, again, is now just beginning to open its ranks essentially to the women, and they're now expanding their integration. So I was actually in the first group of women that were totally going to integrate with the men's programs. So now they're deciding that women leaders and Marines, or a Marine is a Marine is a Marine. So in the early 70s, late 70s, now they're integrating women officers with their just their entire training. So that's really where the evolution begins. So we are now being trained side by side. So now I'm carrying packs, so I show up in my heels and, my makeup on, and they quickly give me an M16, men's boots, men's uniforms, and they're trying to just have them cinch them. And I'm putting extra socks inside the boots so that they fit me until they can quickly get uniforms to fit all of us. So I'm being trained in tactics, defensive tactics, of course, because the law is not allowing women to learn offensive tactics, but they're training us to be able to do this. Although the law still is preventing women to be assigned occupational fields, but they're still teaching us because they're anticipating that the law is going to change with time. So even though I've learned all of this, I'm still being assigned to an administrative assignment, if that means my occupational field. So I'm still assigned into manpower and HR assignments. But the jobs then allow me opportunities to be assigned as I'm moving forward. The realities are nobody really cared about the fact that I was Latina. What was really very, like the first thing everybody noticed was, oh, there's a woman. And so those first jobs, those first assignments was the first woman to come in, not the fact that I was a Latina. So nobody even noticed until I was a captain. And that was because there was a group that was coming from Spain that was touring a base, and they said, oh my gosh, we need somebody that's Hispanic. And they just did a computer glitch. And of course I was putting down on my background, and everything that I was Latino. It didn't say anything about whether I could speak Spanish. And of course, I grew up at a time where my parents were very considerate, and they wanted to make sure that I didn't have an accent. And so they didn't allow us to speak Spanish. So I can understand it fluently, but I cannot speak it well, except for dos enchiladas y un cerveza, por favor. And so that's what I can deal with. But what happens was, I just get called to the general's office saying, okay, you're going to be the escort for these very, very important people. And so I get tagged to be the escorts. And so I understand what they're asking, but I can't necessarily communicate back in Spanish. So this was really the first time that I thought I was going to lose my career. And especially when we go to lunch, because we get served beets and they don't know. And this is very much, most of Hispanics, we know how this happens, is that people tend to talk to you louder when they when they're trying to commute with you, right? So of course that's exactly what I did. Was when I'm trying to explain to them what beets are, I'm just saying it louder to them. So I'm just going, what? So they're asking me, ¿qué es eso? Well, they're beets. ¿Qué es eso? Beets. Beets. They're beets. So that was kind of, so I really thought my Marine Corps career was going to end as I'm a captain. So the fact that I even got to major and on up was too funny. So yeah, somebody's telling me, thank you very much. Yes, but I know that now. Thank you very much. So that was like 35 years ago. Where were you when I needed that then? So thank you.
That is great. We're going to come back to some more of your career journey. I'm going to pull Rosie into this conversation. So Rosie, I think it'd be great. How did you go from San Antonio, Texas to Syracuse, New York, and get involved in our work for the audience? You know, the IVMF will be celebrating its 10-year anniversary next month, and Rosie is one of our original teammates. So she's been with us for a long time, and interested a little bit about how you ended up doing all of this work on the research side with respect to veterans in the military connected community. And then would love to have you take us up a little, as the general referred to, 30,000 feet, and tell us a little bit about what your research shows about some of the challenges faced by our Hispanic and Latino veterans.
Yeah. Well, first off, I think you definitely only need to know the essentials, and it's usually centered around food, drink, and bathroom. So that's important. But yeah, I'm originally from San Antonio. San Antonio is, notorious for being military city USA. So a lot of the work that I did in San Antonio, I did actually more than 10 years on understanding the manpower and training needs for the military. So I worked on various occupational analysis surveys, as well as retention models for the military to support various research efforts. For the past 10 years here at the IVMF, I've taken that knowledge and applied it to the post-service experience, right? So understanding that service experience, transition, employment, and in particular, entrepreneurship aspirations for veterans, as well as military spouses. Last year we did published a data brief specifically on Hispanic and Latinos in the military. And it's really a consolidation of all the data and the research that we've that's out there federally. And that's certainly stuff that we've conducted at the IVMF. And it gives various insights into various aspects. But before I go into the challenges, and it's really great because I prepared what I really wanted to mention and talk about here, but it really lines up nicely with the story that I talked to her. We just heard, there's this common misconception that veterans enter the military because they couldn't get into college. And in fact, for Hispanic and Latino veterans, the top motivation to service is that education benefits. In fact, 61%. And this is significantly higher than the white non-Hispanic counterpart, which is at 52%. The second motivation to service is this desire to serve the country, which is at 58%. I think an important discussion about military service, aside from the technical knowledge and the various occupation, is also the essential skills that were strengthened by military service. So for Hispanic and Latino veterans, the top skills and attributes, were the work ethic, the teamwork, mental toughness, adaptation to different challenges, leadership and management skills. All of these skills are transferable, were certainly enhanced in the military, but absolutely transferable and valued in the workplace and in higher education. What's interesting for Hispanic and Latinos in the military is that one of the reasons they leave the military was actually to pursue education and training opportunities. So 44% indicated this was the reason why I left. And when you look at education outcomes, 75% of the post 9/11 Hispanic and Latino veterans have some college degree or higher. And this is higher compared to the 61% of the general population that have some college degree or higher. But then I want to shift to some challenges, while pursuing degree. Hispanic and Latino student veterans are more likely to be older. They have a job, they have families. So some of the top challenges for Hispanic and Latino veterans was family responsibilities, age differences, working full-time jobs, lack of financial resources. You know, some of the top transitional challenges generally for Hispanic and Latino veterans at the point of separation was really centered around getting a job and financial struggles. You know, we asked what was the most difficult aspect of transition and employment, and the financial aspect of transition was rated as the most difficult. And although unemployment was low pre-pandemic level, the unemployment rates jumped at the beginning of the pandemic level, and in particularly for the younger Hispanic and Latino veterans. Now, over the course of the pandemic, certainly the levels have decreased, but we're not at the pre-pandemic level either. And finally, in terms of entrepreneurship, close to 1 in 10 Hispanic Latino veterans are entrepreneurs or have businesses. And some of the challenges that they've cited, especially this past year, were really centered around lack of capital, you know, the current economic situation, lack of experience in entrepreneurship, and really lack of mentorship. And I've only highlighted a couple of things. There certainly is quite a bit more on the data brief. And I know we're supposed to keep this short, so happy, but I definitely just wanted to go over a handful of stuff.
Thanks, Rosie. You covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and I think somebody will put that brief in the chat for everyone. But General Salinas, I'd love to go back to one of the points that Rosie talked about as you, in speaking about one of the challenges was in transition and employment, the financial implications of transition. So, you know, we talked a little bit about your career, but then let's, you know, fast forward to your transition as you were coming out of the military. Any unique challenges? How did your time in the Marine Corps prepare you for your continued success in the civilian sector?
So that's really a good question. I don't know if it's an issue of being Latino or if it has just an issue with women, because, you know, it is really still about networking. I was a little surprised that it took a little bit more of an effort on decision making, I guess. In my particular part, I think I really had essentially resigned myself to thinking, you know, I worked for 39 years. I'm not really sure I want to work. And half of me also thought, oh, well, geez, look at this incredible, successful career I've had. I'm sure I'm just going to land in San Antonio and I'll arrive and everybody will know, and they'll just be coming out of the woodwork and just offering me like 1 billion jobs. I'm sure that everybody will want me. And so I kind of just sat back a little bit. And you know, I cut the grass and I cleaned the pool and I played some bad golf, and you know, like nobody was really calling. And I'd go places and people say, oh, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm retired. And they kind of give you that look like, oh, you're unemployed. And then people would say, oh, you know, I think Walmart's looking for a greeter. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm not looking for that quite. And so then I just really decompressed and I started doing the things that I think people in the military have done. We volunteer at the USO and you go to the food bank. And then I was getting a couple calls from some businesses and nothing really resonated. And then what I found was, I think people who serve in the military, you're looking for something that matters. And that's really, I was blessed because then I did get a call that mattered. And I got a call from a headhunter at the national level, actually, and said that the local Girl Scouts were looking for the CEO, and if that was something that I would be interested in. And that really spoke to me, this idea of building the next generation of women leaders for my community. And the reason it resonated with me is that my community, the demographics, these girls look like me. And I think that's what really mattered to me, was that this meant that I would have some ability to influence the next generation of Latinas. So I think for me personally, and I can't speak to the long term, but then all the transition, all the leadership, everything that I had been able to experience and build upon for those 39 years in the Marine Corps then came to fruition. And then all the other pieces seemed to fall into place. Then as I started mobilizing to influence the growth of the Girl Scouts, then I started having speaking opportunities. Then people were coming out of the woodwork saying, oh my gosh, how did the Girl Scouts get somebody like you? And of course, then I'm saying, well, why wouldn't the Girl Scouts have somebody like me? So it was very interesting how it all kind of came around.
Thank you for that. I think that you hit it when you said it's about networking. We've seen that both in our career preparation and employment work, as well as the entrepreneurship work that Rosie spoke about. So I think you hit that. But I'll tell you, if we knew that you were looking, then we wouldn't have let you sit there and clean the pool too long. So just to carry on about the idea of you now inspiring this next generation of women leaders, given that you broke the glass ceiling numerous times, as they say, and you are now preparing these young women, how do you instill that confidence? What is the advice that you're sharing with them as they are getting ready to get out into the real world, as they say?
Well, thank you for saying that I broke the glass ceiling. I really didn't. I really truly believe that it's like this big concrete block, and you know, that I was just I feel like I had one of those little, you know, you kind of talk about those little chunky little hammers that are about like a quarter of an inch, you know, and you're just like nubbing away at it. Because there have been some other incredible women that just have really just gone before, for no better way. And I don't know if any of you ever watched that show. I think it's like Ninja Warrior, and you see those glass things, and those guys, the women are like pushing those things, and they weigh like 100,000 pounds. I just think it's this continuous effort by so many people, and that's what our girls get a chance to see. But the real piece is, it's not necessarily teaching people about actually getting there. It's really the resiliency. It's teaching people that you're going to fail, because I think that's what we tend to not. That's what I love about Girl Scouts, you know, is I think we're the safe place that you fail, you know. And I always use the example of girl. I mean, I had a horrible experience a couple of years ago. I mean, I was so naive. You know, I'd go to people, and, you know, big people with lots of money. And I'm sure all of you at the universities, you go through this, you go to these donors, and, you know, you're talking about not like a couple $100 of, I'm going to pledge to you. I'm talking people, I need people like to donate like $100,000, you know. And so I had a donor that had promised a pledge like $250,000, and our donations, you know, we need to get those pledges like in August and September, because we do our annual budget starts like a 1 October. And so this pledge had basically said, like, in the September timeframe, yes, we'll pledge $250,000. Well, we put it in the budget, and then come like, you know, I don't know, it was probably June or July, they basically said, no, we decided not to do that. Well, I've already got camp, I've already scholarshiped all these people, I've already got staff, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I couldn't even fire myself at that point to make the budget. And I was sitting in my car, and I was just like practically in tears, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I'm going to do it. I got to go back and tell the board we're going to be in a deficit budget. What do you do? What do you do? And I literally thought of, you know, a handful of little girls in front of the HEB that are trying to sell 200 boxes of cookies so that they can go make a donation to the food bank. And how many times do they go up to total strangers and they say, would you like to buy a box of cookies? And those, you know, total strangers, so they have to have the courage to go up to the people to begin with. And then the people say, no, I don't want a box of cookies. And they said, oh, well, would you like to buy a box of cookies and give them to your best friend? And they go, no, I don't have any friends. Okay, well, would you like to buy a box of cookies and like give them to the USO or to a Marine or a soldier or sailor, or, you know? And no, we don't. And then those girls still look at those people and say, well, thank you so much and have a nice day. And then they walk back to their table, and they still have that goal. They still have to sell 200 boxes of cookies. And so I was sitting in my car, and I thought, like, if a couple 7-year-olds can figure this out, my gosh, I can too. And so it's that resiliency. That's a safe place. Those girls still figure it out. And I think that's what, when people fail, you know, we don't have that opportunity to kind of teach them about how do you gather that back up. You know, we all celebrate the winners. We all celebrate the people that make it, but we never really go back and look at all the people that tried to get there, the numbers of people that, you know, that got passed over for promotion, you know, the Latinas that made it to captain, the Latinas that made it to major, the Latinas that made it to lieutenant colonel, you know, the ones that made it to colonel, you know, so that's the pieces that I think that sometimes we need to kind of go and find, you know, where was the first captain? I mean, I couldn't find her. You know, I wanted to know those women, but sometimes because they became a Jones, or they became a Smith, or they became a, you know, a Hollandale. I went to look. I mean, I remember there was a woman by the name of Grisham, and she was from San Antonio. And I knew she was a Latina. I knew she was something else, but I tried to, because I knew she was there in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to know her. And people kept saying, we don't know who you're talking about. I said, I know she's from San Antonio. I know she's a Latina. She's here. She was years ahead of me. And I really wanted to kind of track her down. So kind of going back to your original question is, we need to figure out a way to find the people that wanted to be there to go before us and still celebrate them as well. So that's the inspiration that I want us to kind of tell our girls in that next generation is, you know, you got to just keep trying. You got to figure it out. You keep going and looking around, because a lot of people don't make it, but you know what? They chiseled away at the concrete.
I love that analogy. Just curious, would your advice be different for young men?
That's a great question. I get that a lot, but you know, no, because you know, I actually kind of, one time somebody said to me, actually, I'm on a nonprofit of, you know, it's a character building organization, and it's got both boys and girls on it. And so one day, the executive director said, "Oh man, you know, would you like come and talk to the girls?" You know, I said, "No." And so he looked at me and he said, "What?" I said, "No, I won't." And I said, "I'm a member of the board of directors. I'm here to talk to all the young people, you know." And so, and I said, in fact, I'd prefer to talk to just the boys, because I think it's more important that the boys hear from me than from the girls. You know, I'll talk to the girls later, but it's more important that the boys hear from me as a member of the board of directors than it is for the girls to hear from me. So yes, what comes out of my mouth is just as important as it does for the women, because I think that men need to learn, and you know, for you boys, just as important, that the leadership that come from me, and I'd like to think, and I got to tell you this, one time I was at 8th and I at an event, and this young male lieutenant, you know, was like standing in line. Normally I have tons of young women that would stand in line and say, "Oh ma'am, you know, can I take a picture with you?" And I was standing around at 8th and I, and this line of young men were standing there, and this young lieutenant, you know, just looked so sharp in his uniform, and he just came up, he said, "Ma'am, may I take a picture with you?" And he says, "I've just really admired you." And I was, okay, it was just unusual. And he said, the reason is that most people are Latina. I'm so excited because you're Latina. I'm a Latina, you know, but he was, my occupational field, and it never dawned on me, but I'm the only general that was a manpower person to make general too. So when you kind of look at this, I was the first Latina, I was the first, you know, a lot of things, but I'm the only HR person, for no better way, that also made general. And so that was his field. So for a person a male being in that occupational field, it gave him aspirations of thinking, okay, even the Marine Corps will pick an HR guy, because traditionally they'll pick an aviation person, or they'll pick a combat arms guy, or they'll pick a logistician, you know, an intel guy, they'll pick a communicator, but they had never picked a manpower person. So that was like the first time that he was like, "Oh my God, they picked an HR person." So he didn't care that I was a woman. He didn't care I was a Latina. He just was excited that I was a manpower person. So you just never know who's going to be the one that's going to go, "That's my role model." You know, That's my inspiration, if it makes any sense.
Oh, it does, totally. I'm interested, Rosie, to take this down and get a little personal. We know you are the mom of some teenage girls, and you know, as we think about all that is, you know, we're reading about with social media and its impact on young women. They have you know, a Hispanic Latino background. How do you coach them? What do you take, you know, as you're thinking about positioning them for success as they move forward?
Oh, I'm always seeking advice, honestly. So if audience members have insights on this one, I'd love to hear feedback. But, you know, I really like, and I think, you know, there's such a tremendous pressure to be perfect, and especially in social media. I mean, ultimately, you're seeing a skewed sense of perfection with filters, right? And I think it's really important that to really understand perfection is unattainable. So back to the lessons learned and the values, I really like what you said, because I teach my kids it's okay to fail. In fact, you will fail. You don't learn from your successes, you honestly learn from your failures. I think what's really important isn't the fact that you failed, it's what you did afterwards with your failure, right? And I think that honestly is probably the most important lesson that I hope my girls take with them, and take it throughout their life. Now, another aspect, and again, back to this being perfect pressure times that we are, I feel like there's this idea that you have to have your life and your career completely mapped out. And the reality is the workforce is changing. You know, we're not no longer thinking about the rest of our lives. What are you going to do for the rest of your lives? And I think that instead we should just focus on what's achievable now. You know, what skills do you want to enhance now? What are you passionate about now? And it may or may not mean go to school right away or go to military service, but it just means why don't you reflect on the now and enhance the now? It'll eventually come later.
Thank you. Appreciate you going a little personal with us. General Salinas, I'd love to go back. You know, we're talking about leadership in a multicultural age, but I'd love to get some insights, you know, as you moved up through the ranks, and what were those leadership skills or traits, or, you know, how would you describe your leadership style? And for those of us who, as I tell my team all the time, I'm in a constant work in progress and always looking to improve or enhance my own leadership skills. So would love to hear some insights from you about that.
You know, I tell you, I think that's really interesting. You know, when I look back, I have a caricature that I was going through some old boxes, and I think it changes. So I think when I was brand new lieutenant, you know, I was just trying to find my place, and I think I wanted, you know, you look around and young lieutenants were like really gruff and hard, and so this caricature is like a young Marine on his knees, and he's kind of like chewing his nails off, and there's like sweat coming off it, and then there's me like up in the air, and I'm like, you know, like screaming at him kind of a thing. So I must have been a very authoritative, like really causing fear and everybody running into the, you know, the closets and kind of being away from me. And I think ideally we all really want to be the kind of leader that you inspire people and you motivate them, and you basically reward and praise in public, and then you really kind of, you know, chastise, I guess, in private. And I think really what you're finding is that the military culture is really trying to evolve. And I think, you know, I grew up in a top bottom silo, I guess, leadership style. And I think today's society, people were all kind of, you know, it's different. You know, we're not raising kids this way. And so they're not necessarily coming into an organization. We used to believe that people came to the Marine Corps, for example, seeking discipline and, you know, just get in line, shut up. We will, you know, we'll tell you if we want you to think or talk or do anything. And so it's just really interesting, because I don't know, and I'm speaking away from the uniform. It is going to be interesting to see how today's kids are going to evolve into the culture that we need, Because remember, we all come from society. So how are we going to mold today's society to be the military that we need? Because it still has to be able to be a reactive force that is going to go and do the things that this country needs to do. And it may not be a politically correct military. And that's really what we have to decide, because it has to do the things that need to be done to protect the democracies of this country. So that's really what we have to kind of figure out. And that's a real challenge. And the question is, are we willing, to, send our kids into harm's way? And that's really the challenge. And there's a greater divide. And this is really where, as parents, can we do that? So I mean, it's really tough. I mean, I'm watching girls grow up. I have a lot of girls that come to me asking to write recommendations for them to go to the academies. I sit on the academy boards of two, one Senator Cornyn and on Representative Castro. I see applications, tons and tons of kids of wanting to go to the academies, trying to, so that we've got kids that want to serve, and I too have mixed emotions as we see, the demands, but I got to tell you, it's amazing. It is incredibly amazing. The sense of wanting to still serve something greater than themselves.
You've just touched on a question that we received, which is, would you recommend military service to young women? And if so, what is the advice you give them to help them navigate it?
Well, again, so what I tell people, men or women, is that it's a lifestyle. I mean, it is, this is really something, it's a choice, it is a choice, just like, it's not a job. I mean, this is really what I try to tell people. Some people will come in and, like Rosie was kind of saying, you're picking a job skill. But the realities are when you go in, you're choosing a way to live. And as I said, there are intangibles. That's what makes the life a life of richness, because they're not things you can touch. They're things. It's an extended family, and I think that's why the people, when we walk away and you come to a community like San Antonio, or you run into another veteran, and this is what I talk about. You just kind of know, it's like this, like this, I don't know, I kind of call it the code or something, but it's basically like, your neighborhood, you walk around and people know the veterans, they have flags outside, a veteran, like you could be at Home Depot or something, you kind of know because they're the ones that, hey, can I help you? I mean, it's just interesting. They're the ones that are at the food bank. The veterans are the ones that they're the ones that stand up when the American flag goes by at the parade, whether they're in a wheelchair or not. I mean, it's just, they're the ones at the ball games that put their hands over their hearts and take their hats off. You can spot veterans and they're the ones that shake your hand, and they say, or you're at work and they go, hey, I got it. And you never have to check on it because, they're the ones that are going to get the job done. So I think those are the intangibles that I think most of us miss. It's the people. It's not normally the task. It's not the misery. I was talking to somebody yesterday. They were like, I don't miss camping. Like when people go, hey, do you want to go camping? No, I don't want to go camping. I went camping for 39 years of my life. Why would I want to go camping? I do not want to go camping. So there's just, I don't want to eat an MRE. No, thank you. I don't need to eat dehydrated food. I want to stay at the TPC Marriott, like on the 3rd floor. I want to stay up there. So there's just stuff that we want to do. I don't need to get on a plane and fly to the Philippines again. Trust me, I've gone places, but so there's just that piece, if that makes any sense. So.
Oh, it does. I want to go back and it's a little more related to I think the question or the comment that you were just making about military service as a lifestyle. And someone has asked about if in advising the military, what advice or how could the military today help Hispanic and Latino people feel more comfortable, welcomed, valued for their contributions and their service?
Well, I think, Rosie's probably brings some great statistics. I mean, the challenge is that regardless of ethnicity, the fact across the board is, you're talking about a culture, which is the military in itself. And now you're trying to bring in a bunch of cultures and put them all in one box. So how do you take all this diversity and then put it into a box where it has to all be the same box, or it has to all be in the same line? So if my culture, says that I need, like I party every, like every, Cinco de Mayo, that's my day, so it's just, but the military wants me deployed, on the Cinco de Mayo. I can't party. I can't do my tequila because I'm aboard ship, so those are the things. But that's the thing, I have to give up my piece to be part of that, so that's the dilemma that I think we're all struggling with, is what do you weigh? So I'm giving up my celebrations and my culture to be able to do that. And now, is it the military's fault? But I've signed on the dotted line. So do I blame the military because you're not helping me celebrate that? And I think that's where we're kind of having this battle. I think, well, you don't respect me, or you're not inclusive of me. And this is where, and how many of these do we include? Is it the majorities? Like if there's only 2 of us, if it's, the smallest of it, does that matter that I don't matter? Or is it all, you have to be representative of at least 25% of the whole group to be inclusive? And so I think at some point it's just, I mean, I don't know where you draw the line. Do you draw a line? Do you don't draw a line? Are we inclusive all the way? Do we discriminate? Don't discriminate? And then again, it is what do we have? I mean, I don't know. This is very, I think the military is trying to, I think the military leadership is trying as best they can. But at some point, do you say it's all or nobody? So, because now I think, I think that's really what it's, we're just going to have one diversity celebration and everybody's in. So now, no longer do we have, so for example, Robert Bard does Latina Style Magazine. So he's the only organization that I'm familiar with that he started, and I think 18 or 19 years ago, he chose to take and make a special award. He does Latinas in the military, and he does a meritorious award. And like in September, he would do this luncheon in Washington, D.C. He started because nobody recognized the fact that there were Latinas at the academies. And so that's how he started. He said, I will give one award to each you military academies, pick a Latina and bring them to DC. I'll pay for it. He did a deal with Southwest, brought them into DC, honored them, brought in congressional leaders, like made it a really big deal. Then the next year he said, I went to the Army, went to the Navy, went to the Marine Corps, said, hey, I will give one. You guys pick them. Let's have a luncheon. You bring in some people. We'll celebrate. Kind of partnered with some civilian organizations. He's done this for 18 or 19 years. So for the last 4 or 5 years, they're saying, no, we don't want to no longer separate and do just Latinos. So DOD won't fund them anymore. Because now we don't want to do women anymore, because we can't, we don't want to now just we don't want to identify just women. So the women's leadership organizations no longer are being funded by DOD. African American organizations aren't getting funded anymore. So now, because they don't want to spread a load, they want to just like do one big thing. So now in reality, now the groups that were really being empowered and getting some funding from DOD aren't able to. So I don't know what's happening anymore. For before, they were getting some empowerment, some support, and now they're not. So it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, I think. So it is, I think, now going to be incumbent on many other organizations outside of DOD to do a lot of the support for the military, like you all are doing, which is really incredible. So thank you to Syracuse.
Oh, thank you, General. You inspire us to do even more. And And I think that's actually a really good segue into this next question, which is, we just talked a little bit about the military's efforts to be more cognizant of diversity and inclusion. And I think that we've seen obviously a much more focused effort by the private sector on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. So sort of putting on your private sector hat now, if you were advising, corporations, is it the same like what you just talked about with the military? But that's against the mission of the military and how they if we're going to be militarily ready, it's a little bit different than we as a nonprofit serving veterans, or a university, or a private business that wants to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are the kinds of things we should be thinking about?
Again, that's probably a little bit out of my, I really always think best to ask your clients. I used to think I could sit up here and go, oh, they need this, like the girls need this, our volunteers need this. And I've really gotten to the point where we just shoot out quick surveys, like 5 questions, 4 questions, 2 questions, boom, boom, boom. And even if I only get 15, 2%, 5% back, it gives me a little bit to either give me some basis of the direction I'm going to go in. I found, just a quick story. We were sitting at a board meeting with I have 12 girls that sit on my board of directors and 22 adults. We select them annually, and what a difference the girls, they have a voice, which is empowering for the council, the girls to know. Every year we have more girls that they all apply, which is just phenomenal. And we had sold a camp property, and we were looking at reinvesting that money in the other camp that we had left. And all the adults were talking about putting air conditioning, because it's always hot in the summer and blah, 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 blah. Very excited. We're about ready to vote. The girls, of course, we turn and say, all right, girls, what do you say? They all got up and literally we gave them all the little red dots so that they could go and put them on all the different the recommendations on where they could spend the money. Literally all went to a higher adventure course, turned around and literally said to all adults, it's camp. We don't need no stinking air conditioning. And so these 12 girls literally changed the entire direction of where we were going to spend literally $1 million. So that is why I'm saying that while an entire group, nonprofit leadership, thinks that maybe the clients, veterans kind of want this, they in fact might give you an entire direction of what you might be able to do. And that's why I'm saying, somebody who's been in the level where I've been, I'm a box kicker. I used to think that my company, my staff, my team, my drill instructors really wanted this. I would go out and say, what do you really want? And my drill instructor, I want a DI cover like the men. And that was one of the first things that I fought and got them the DI campaign covers. And so, we don't want soft little baby blue sweatshirts, we want a bold cover, so we went out and got a burgundy deep color, and they wear it still to this day. So asking the people that are down there, boots on the ground, that's what really matters.
Another great piece of advice for all of us. This hour has absolutely flown by. I was going to give Rosie and everyone another minute or two to sort of wrap up, but we really are right at the top of the hour. And, General Salinas, we love the opportunity to bring you back again. There's so many different avenues I'd love to pursue, and I'm sure others would too, as we think about all the things that we could learn from you. And we're going to be sure to pull you out for some good Mexican food the next time we're in San Antonio. Rosie's Rosie's usually our guide and down there, but we'll bring you along for some of the treats. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining. Joe, thank you so much for helping us to move this thing along. Rosie, your insights are always incredible. We thank you. And again, General Salinas, you're a treasure for this community and for those Girl Scouts that you have right now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Everyone be safe.